PowerPoint of a presentation I made at the annual conference for the Nevada Association of Counties on September 24th in Las Vegas. This was a session that covered public lands and other private lands and other land policies. In the next slide, as you see, this is a map of state land ownership. The unique thing about the state of Nevada is the amount of land that is owned or administered by the federal government. But a unique characteristic of Nevada and all western states, as opposed to the eastern states, is the amount of public lands that are in each state. If you look at this one picture we have of the checkerboard of the railroads, that is about 4.2 million acres of checkerboard land. It intermixes between private loan and BL managed parcels, and so what happens, you do not have a contiguous land mass to do economic development. Sometimes you need a certain amount of land to do economic development. This kind of disjointed land ownership causes problems for economic development. As you can see, is also in many areas, there's a lot of public lands. In some of our counties, such as Lincoln, can be 98% public lands. Story County is one of the smaller percentage of total land mass that is public lands. But we'll talk about these others. And you have Bureau of Reclamation, Department of Defense, Energy, all different types of federal agencies, as well as the checkerboard. This slide shows the 5 western states, and you see the characteristic of all of them. They do have public lands, and the degree that federal lands are a percent of the total land mass. In the state of Nevada, 87% is federal land. The state lands are very small, and so it's private land ownership is only about 12%. Arizona is 43% private, but you can see the different states have different degrees of land ownership or land that's administrated by federal lands. Very unique compared to other areas in the nation, but even in the West, it's not similar to each state. Some interesting facts. The state of Nevada has 110,567 square miles. This entire landmass makes Nevada the 7th largest state in the nation by acreage. But if you take that public land quantity out, in which you only have 12.2% private land, that makes Nevada the 10th smallest state in acreage. Very interesting. We're larger than Maryland, but smaller than West Virginia. So that's kind of a relative idea of public and private land ownership in the state. Another thing that I have is that this land usually is federal land, so state governments and local governments cannot tax higher levels of government. And so the feds, because they know their presence causes costs to local governments, they have this program called Payment in Lieu of Taxes, or PILT. In 2015, Nevada received $23.3 million in PILT payments, while New Mexico got $34.5 million and California $42.2 million. However, Nevada has 56.8 million acres in federal land, while New Mexico has 22.8 and California has 40 million acres. Well, how's this done? Well, mainly there is a formula that's done for PILT payments, and this formula has some caps that are made by population. The state of Nevada only has 17 counties. I forgot the number of counties that are in New Mexico, but it's quite a bit larger than the state of Nevada. And having more counties with this population cap means more money. I don't know if that's a allocation that should be revised or reinvestigated, but it seems like for Nevada, they're getting 23.3 million acres in PILT, where New Mexico is 34 million. We have 56 million acres in federal land, while New Mexico has 22. Seems there should be part of contention there. Now, how about the largest public lands? What is the impact of public land management? BLM is the largest public land manager in the state. In 2012, they managed 47.8 million acres of Nevada acreage, or 67.5% of Nevada's land acreage. Now, the thing that people have to be cognizant of is that BLM has operations. They are like an export industry because their decisions are made outside of the state. And so they bring incomes, they bring operation expenditures into counties, into the state that would not already have. And in that case, what we have is direct employment of 4,691 people and expenditures or economic output of about $542 million. By the multiplier effect, by those increases, the overall impact of the Nevada economy is a total of 7,664 jobs, or about $1 billion in economic activity. This is something that should be recognized. If you lose the public lands, federal lands, you may lose partial of this. These studies that was done by BLM show the impacts of the operations and wages of federal personnel. People who have personal expenditures who are hired by the federal government usually are people who are pretty well paid and have benefits with them. They also purchase locally. They purchase goods and services, they buy homes, autos, and they impact the local economy. Also, the BLM, by its purchasing, it should be recognized it's an industry. And do they purchase outside the county or the state? Maybe we can look at import substitution where more expenditures by these federal agencies occur in the state, buying paper products. But that requires a special type of federal procurement. Also, there's impacts from federal lands from recreation and other activities such as ranching and gold mining. Now with tourism, the key with tourism is where the expenditures are made. If somebody goes from Las Vegas to Caliente, that is from Clark County to Lincoln County, if they buy all their Fritos and all their expenditures in Clark County and recreate in Lincoln, there's no impact because those expenditures are made in another county. For tourism, it's how much are spent locally. And then from that, if it's from retail, you have to take only the markup that stays. So tourism expenditures are increasing and are important, but you have to recognize where they occurred and what type of expenditures they are. And I might say, expenditures for a different type of tourism have different impacts. People who go out and hunt for deer versus elk versus bird watching are totally different in their expenditure patterns. As for ranch operations, county governments get a lot of their property taxes from compensatory valuation of public lands. That is, if only on private land, for example, I only could raise one cow, but I have access by grazing permits to have a cow that can raise on public lands, that might mean I can have two. So I've increased my herd by two. That increase in property is capitalized in the private land because you cannot tax the public land. In that case, you see what happens, and very important for county governments, how is the property taxes, compensatory value. The increase in production activity is valued in the private land, and this causes increases, or if there's changes in the BLM, changes in grazing permits, that would cause decreases in county property taxes because that capitalized value would be lost. There's also gold operations, which have impacts, as we all know, oil and gas, and clean energy. When they build solar, geothermal, wind, they have impacts. Now, there have been studies on the BLM, and several of the studies, there have been several studies on public lands, and several of the studies have found amenities go into economic impacts. Amenities have played an important part in location of local people and industries, of the new type of entrepreneurs, and also people who have become retired. I'm going to go down through a couple of them just to give these are texts that you can look up and read in more detail. Snapper et al. In 1995 found the quality of life factors are important for business owners' decisions to locate in greater Yellowstone region. They found out for people in Yellowstone with these amenities. Well, those amenities also, you get people like Harrison Ford and other people live in Yellowstone area. Those are areas that have unique, I must say, amenity values, but those are major factors, and because it brings in people with higher incomes, more businesses. Nelson in 1995 found that natural amenities, including public lands, are key for the knowledge-based workforce. It seemed like the knowledge-based workforce likes to have amenities, and those amenities are with public lands. McGranahan in 1999 looked at growth rates in counties and found counties with the highest growth rates were those with the highest amenities. Now that's public lands, but there's other amenities that are included in this factor of what they call amenities: water, recreation, golf courses, those things like that. Shumway and Otterman found greater numbers of immigrants were counties called the New West. Proximity of public lands are positive in the preponderance of service-based employment. Well, we've seen that in many areas of areas that have public lands, skiing, people do bike riding, hiking. Yes, there's a lot of service sector to go with it. Ritz, I know I'm not pronouncing that correctly, in 1993 found the counties with congressionally designated wilderness areas grew faster than non-wilderness areas. And then finally, Rasker in 2006 found some, and Rasker in 2013 found information that per capita income growth from 1990 to 2001 and per capita investment income on average grew faster in these areas. Counties have national park, wildernesses, and other forms of protected public lands. An argument that suggests that recent advances in communication, decoupling knowledge base versus manufacturing centers now allows people to do their work in rural areas, remote rural areas that are closer to these public lands. That's true. There seems to be with the internet that vast distances in the West that were once thought to be hinterlands and hindrance for economic growth because they're so far. If they have communications developments, that can bring more development because of amenities. But the problem is sometimes our internet is not equal throughout the nation. In many of our rural areas, especially that have amenities, it may not be as great as people want. But if they do have good internet, it will be a positive factor for economic development being close to public lands. Also, rapid growth in passive incomes have brought lands as amenities mainly for future economic development. This is for the retired folks, the silver-haired economy. Personal income is made by income by place of work, but also dividends, interest and rents, and transfer payments, Social Security. Dividends, interest and rents, and transfer payments make up 30% plus of the national income, an increasing segment of our economy. With 10,000 baby boomers retiring, this segment becomes larger and larger, and they like to live in areas like public lands, and as long as they have safety and health options or health care options, this is very positive for them. Others found that access to metropolitan markets or access to markets by interstate is important. Basically, if you have abilities for transportation to get by interstate, we usually find that true. Use of public lands for extraction or preservation, there's some interesting analysis going on there. A very excellent economist, labor economist, Moriarty at California says that businesses like to be close for markets, interaction between people, and access to labor and financing. This is what kind of works against rural areas, is that other thing happens to be interaction between people. But if you have internet, you can, and good internet, that kind of breaks down that factor. Now, other studies on public lands, basically several researchers have found amenities to be have an impact, but not sufficient for stimulating economic growth. Others have looked at this, but they said other things. Booth in 1990 found that two forces causes growth in the Mountain West. One was the beauty of the landscape. The other is access to the metropolitan centers to be an asset. Commuting ranges. The further you are from the large metropolitan, the less economic activity you have. You have nice amenities, but there's something about the growing of this new geography of jobs, the churning that goes on in metropolitan areas. Yes, that's good, but as an amenity varies, but the closer you are, if you're in close proximity or can get to metropolitan areas, the faster you have growth. Rasker in 2009, Rasker and Hansen confirmed the importance of access to markets and large population, particularly airports. This has become kind of a centerpiece for metropolitan counties. Good airports and access to airports are very essential for economic growth with a new economy. Lewis, Hunt, and Platagina, 2002, found that public land preservation is associated with robust population but not employment growth. They found public land management practices or preservation or extraction had no effect on wage growth. Population growth can be retired, but other things on employment growth. Duffy Denio in 1998 found with 250 non-metropolitan counties in Rocky Mountains no evidence in when you have a congressionally designated federal wilderness on population or employment growth, directly or indirectly. Again, I think it has to do with access to the metropolitan areas. This other one, Eichmann in 2010 found a Northwest Forest Plan relocated 11 million acres to old growth forests, led to decrease in local employment growth and increase in net migration. This can happen. Charney, McLean, and Donahue, 2008, found when reviewing the Northwest Forest Plan that a shift from resource extraction did not always lead to amenity migration. There's more than one factor. We always have to be aware. There's multi-factors that come in with this that we have to be aware of. Just because you have amenities of public lands, there are other factors that come in. Closeness to metropolitans, access to high-speed internet, those things together. There's numerous factors that come with economic growth. Having amenities helps that. It's one of the factors. Economic development issues. Basically, we have to be aware that federal land operations and employment. Federal lands have expenditures. Employees have expenditures too. They are an export industry because they're bringing money from the federal. These are decisions made by the federal government in D.C. coming into the local. They have an impact. That has to be recognized. If they have a transfer of public lands to the state lands, you have to be aware that there's going to have to be an expansion of state government with public land management proper. So it needs to be looked at there. Urban and rural interface. If these things changes, how will the rural and urban interface be affected? Urban people go to rural areas with public lands for recreation. Rural also want to be connected with urban and also participate in the new economy. There's an interface there that has to be understood with this change. Lands can be coordinated or even a trust. These are some areas of where land coordination, how they are given or how they're changed from federal to public or private or state. Even they could be lands that be in a trust and then accessed properly for economic development by some rules that people make by the state or public decisions. Potential efficiency in land operations and changes. Yeah, they could have increased efficiency. These are expensive operations. You have to be aware of it, and you need to be funded efficiently. Sometimes I think what's happened with federal, there's been budget cuts, and many of our managers are faced with budget cuts, more land, more requirements, more laws. Just as private industries are faced with mandates, so do public agencies. This can impact how they're being used. PILT statewide is something I like. PILT payments, how they're being used, how they're being calculated. In public lands also, we have federal surface water. Not only do we have public lands federal, but we have surface waters are adjudicated by federal government. So you got a coordination there that happens. And so at the end of the day, when we went and made discussions, we discussed this area of public lands, federal, public lands in relation to state lands in relation to private lands. This is an argument that will or analysis that needs to be begun for many years. In fact, it needs a proper long-term analysis to be done because there are probably certain unintended consequences that would occur if this is not properly studied. But I found that the session I was in was very informative. People had a lot of questions, public managers, and also county government people. It was a very informative session, and I hope you found this voiceover PowerPoint informative for you also. There's also a sheet that I hope we can, if you have some questions or discussions, that will be in this whole section on the map of the quarter. I'd like to thank you for your time and your patience in listening to this voiceover PowerPoint. Thank you.